Hey, you guys, it's Peter, and I'm back. Of course I'm back. I'm not going anywhere. Boost. Peekaboo. I see you because I'm YouTube famous now. Available summer 2023. The album, Dad, Shimmy Shimmy, AF, Rock on Gold Dust, Woman. Boost! How are you guys doing today? I've taken a few days off and just rested and relaxed, and it has been really, really nice. I've been watching a ton of TV over the last couple days. Last night, I watched, if you want a TV show recommendation, if you're into true crime, I watched Missing, Dead or Alive. It's a new true crime show that came out on Netflix. It's 4 episodes. It's about an investigative team in North Carolina, I believe, that tries to find people that are missing. It's kind of like 48 Hours a little bit. It's very, very good. And I binge watched the whole show. It's interesting because like the first episode is like 1 hour and 7 minutes, and then the second episode is like 45 minutes, and the third episode is like 30 minutes, and the fourth episode, it's like there's no consistency to the timing of each episode, but it's very, very good, and I binge watched the whole thing last night. And I highly, highly recommend it if you're looking for a new true crime documentary to watch. So anyway, and I also took yesterday off because it was Mother's Day, but it was also the 15-year anniversary of the passing of my mom. My mom passed away 15 years ago yesterday. And, well, first of all, I want to say a belated Happy Mother's Day to all of the mothers out there, to all of the pet mothers out there, to all of the mother figures out there. And the mother figures to me have been so profoundly implemental in my life to forming me to be the person that I am today. And I feel so blessed that I have had so many strong, empowered women in my life before and since my mother has passed away, to encourage me to be myself, to inspire me, to motivate me, to lift me up, to challenge me, to be the people in my life that tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. And I feel so completely blessed by that, When I was a kid growing up and all of my friends were girls, a lot of people made fun of that. They would say, oh, all of Peter's friends are girls, And that really hasn't changed a whole lot through the years. To this day, my best friend, Tanya Jean, is a woman, and my sponsor is a woman, and I am surrounded by just really cool women in my life, and I feel so completely blessed by that, and so I want to thank all of the women in my life out there that have helped me become the person that I am today, and I am a believer that it takes a village. So I want to say that, but I'm not somebody that really celebrates death dates. I know that there are a lot of people out there that do that. Some of my friends do that. Some of my friends on the passing of their parents or whatever go to the gravestones and whatever. That's not a big deal for me. Like, I would rather celebrate like my mom's birthday or just memories that I have of her on some random Tuesday or something like that than actually celebrate the death date. But I think because it landed on Mother's Day, it kind of affected me differently yesterday, And if you didn't see my Instagram story, I put up some pictures of my mom, some older ones and some ones from before she passed away. So I'll put them up here right now in case you missed those. But, it was interesting because 15 years is a long time to grieve someone, and my grieving process has changed a lot in the last 15 years. I think the first couple years I was really numb, like I really didn't know how to feel, and I just felt this. If you've never lost a parent, it's kind of this feeling that you can't really explain. It's so surreal to have had this person by your side your entire life, and then all of a sudden they're no longer there. And I don't know about other people's relationships with their parents. I think everybody's is different, but my relationship with my mom was one of unconditional love. And so to have somebody that unconditionally loves you, but will still tell you what you need to hear, and then that be gone is so like bizarre to like, it just all of a sudden you realize you no longer have that, And so the first couple years I was very, very numb, and then I went through years where I would like, want to pick up the phone and talk to her, and then I'd be like, oh, I can't call her, And then I would, smell her cologne or her perfume, and have memories of her and whatever. But like over time, like the grieving process kind of changes. And I think today I'm just so incredibly grateful for the time that I had with her, and I've told a lot of stories about my mom, in here, and for those of you that don't know, I got sober December 17th of 1994. My mom's sobriety date was June 2nd of 1995, and so we had almost 13 years of sobriety together. And, if you're a parent out there that's struggling, I have to tell you that the greatest gift that my mother ever gave me was her sobriety, because we were able to have that together, And that was just one of the coolest things. And so I'm so grateful for especially that later part in life that we were able to have together, where I was able to be a child and she was able to be a parent, and it was so cool, So I don't know, yesterday I was just thinking a lot about my mom, and just really grateful for the time that I've had, and also just really grateful for my mom's best friend Susie was just visiting in town, and we went out to lunch, and I'm just so grateful for all of the women that have, taken her place, and since she passed away, and have, I have so many mothers in my life, whether they're the biological or not, I don't think really matters, and that have really just lifted me up and helped me become the person that I am today, and I'm so incredibly grateful for it, including my stepmother, my cousin Caroline, my best friend Tanya, my sponsor, on and on and on. I have so many people in my life that have just really, really helped me get to where I'm at today. So I wanted to say that. And I know you guys are like, well, I thought this was a video about Shane Dawson. This is a video about Shane Dawson. So let's get into this. Okay, so this is one of the most requested videos that I have received in a very long time. And it is about Shane Dawson talking about his cancellation. So Shane Dawson went on Steve-O from Jackass, his podcast. Now I have to tell you, I didn't, and I have notes taken and everything. I watched the whole podcast last night. I did not even know that Steve-O had a podcast, okay? But I did know that Steve-O is in recovery, and very real recovery. Well, the same kind of recovery that I'm at. He works a 12-step program, and I knew that, and I've heard him speak about it, and I've heard him talk about addiction and recovery, and our philosophies are very, very similar when it comes to recovery, and I love to hear him talk about addiction. And it was interesting because when you watch the podcast, there's a lot between he and his co-host Scott that they kind of weave in talking about addiction as well and recovery. And so it's very interesting, especially for a person in recovery, to be watching this podcast where they're interviewing Shane Dawson essentially about his cancellation, and then they're relating it to recovery and addiction, shame, guilt, things like that. And so it was very interesting to me to watch. I thought it was a highly informed and very educated interview that they did with him. So I didn't even know he had a podcast. And so it was interesting to me to watch. I didn't know what to expect. I honestly thought that it would be very slapstick, back and forth, kind of funny, ha-ha, between he and Shane. That's what I kind of expected. When you go in and you start watching the podcast, at the very beginning, Steve-O talks about, like, it's like, kind of like, before he does all of his podcasts from this van. And, so it's before that, and he's talking about how he had like watched this video about Shane Dawson. I'm assuming it's some kind of drama video, and that about Shane Dawson's past and whatever, and that they were even kind of like, and I'm just paraphrasing this. I watched it one time. So for all of you out there that are like, no, what he actually said was, I'm just telling you what I got from it, okay? And basically what he said was, we almost kind of like didn't do the interview because of all this business of Shane Dawson and his past, but we're glad that we gave him the opportunity to come on and talk, right? Okay, so I started watching this interview, and immediately what was very, very obvious was that Shane Dawson was extremely, extremely nervous, okay? I mean, you can tell. Like, he is very, very nervous. Like, he has no idea where this is going. And, he even says in there to some degree that, because they ask him about being nervous on there, right? Like, it's very telling, you can tell. And he says, I don't really talk about this stuff. when I'm on my podcast, like if it goes in that direction, I kind of stop it. And basically what he's saying is anytime that it comes up, I ultimately have control over how I'm going to talk about it, how I'm going to address it, how I'm going to put it out there in the world. And if like I'm in this podcast and you're interviewing me, I really have no control over what direction it's going to go. In fact, at one point he says something, and it's rather interesting how he says it. He says, hold on a second. I want to make sure I get this right. He says something to the effect of, if he comes out, he says if he talks about it, people think he's trying to be a victim. And if he doesn't, then people think that he's being manipulative or that he's trying to change the narrative, so he just doesn't talk about it. Which I actually think is kind of an interesting perspective. And I understand that coming from Shane Dawson's point of view. Now, before I even get into talking about the several points that I put down in my notes, I want to say this, okay? I thought it was probably... Now, you have to remember, I have met Shane Dawson, okay? I have met the man, Shane Dawson, off the screen. And like I've said many, many times, he's very business-minded. He's very much a 30-plus-year-old adult man that talks to business, okay? Like, he's not this funny, ha-ha, oh, you have to buy my slime. I mean, he's not that person, like, in real life, right? Which is interesting because he even kind of addresses that in here. And he says something to the effect of that he doesn't tell gross jokes, like in his personal life, which I find really hard to believe because when he was with me, he did tell gross jokes, and that was off camera. So I don't know how much I truly believe that. But I will say, this funny ha-ha Shane Dawson that you get that's always making funny faces and shocked faces and stuff, I think that is all for the camera. And so it did seem to me like it was a much more genuine, down-to-earth Shane Dawson that was very nervous and scared to even do this interview. What was interesting to me was after the interview, because one of the things that Shane says in there was, I think I have notes about this too, but that he doesn't like to do these interviews, or he doesn't like to go and do things for people because he is afraid of the negative attention that it's going to bring the other person. Like, for example, if he goes on Steve-O's podcast, Steve-O is going to get a lot of negative backlash from this, like in the comments and people saying, oh, you should never have had Shane on your podcast and whatever, okay? Which I understand that. Like, I get that point of view that Shane's saying. What was interesting to me, and Steve-O's like, well, you're going to get negative with whatever you do anyway, so I don't really care about that. I went and I read the comments, and I mean to tell you, the comments are absolutely glowing. I mean, unbelievably glowing in response to Shane Dawson being on the podcast. Thank you, Steve, for having Shane on your podcast. Thank you for giving him the opportunity to tell his story. Shane, you were so down to earth. This is the Shane Dawson that I love. Shane, 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 Shane. What was interesting to me about all these comments were people were really building Shane up and talking about how fantastic he did on the podcast and how wonderful he was, and this was the most genuine that he was, which he did seem pretty genuine on the podcast. But what was interesting to me about it is if you watch the podcast, Shane really doesn't talk a whole lot on there. They kind of ask him questions, and then they take kind of bits and pieces of what he says, and then they turn it into kind of teaching moments. Like Steve and Scott turn them in to kind of teaching moments about shame and guilt and, you know, having like just regret and things like that. And there's a lot of Shane being like, oh yeah, like, oh, I had never really thought of it that way. Oh yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. It's kind of like this teaching moment of Shane Dawson. You don't really see Shane come out and say a lot of kind of profound statements about what he's learned. And in fact, one of the most shocking things to me that people didn't really pick up on this interview was that Shane never comes out and addresses exactly why he was canceled. I mean, he comes out and kind of alludes to past videos that he did and the poor jokes and things like that. But even then, he says, you know, like, I was trying to kind of like have learning experiences with each of these videos. So even if I was doing something that was like a horrible joke in a video, like I would tie it up at the end with it being like a learning experience about an eating disorder or something. He uses that as an example. And I'm like, I don't know, Shane, like you still kind of don't get it. Like you still don't kind of get how your humor was like, you know, it was off back then. And yes, and I understand that humor 10 years ago was different than humor today. And I think that that's really maybe one of the difficulties that Shane Dawson has in reconciling, that it's like he doesn't understand why he's being canceled or was canceled today for something that was so different 10 years ago, instead of just accepting and saying, what I did then is not okay today, and I need to take a look at that and see what's going on. He talks a lot about therapy in there. And it's interesting, he talks about how his therapist got him through these times and blah, 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 and that if it wasn't for Ryland, that he would be dead, he says, and that Ryland really helped him get through a lot of this, and that they moved to Colorado. He kind of explains all that. But it was interesting to me that they don't specifically ask him, and he doesn't specifically talk about, like, which things got him canceled, and he doesn't talk about specifically all the offensive things he did, and that he also doesn't talk about, you know, like, how that has affected him today and what he's doing to change that. As somebody that has continued to watch Shane Dawson to cover him on Drama Channel videos since he's come back, I feel that Shane Dawson still has a poor edit button when it comes to his humor. I think he still makes gross jokes from time to time. I think that he makes a lot of jokes about being canceled, which is interesting because at one point, Scott kind of says something about this, and Scott says it's a deflection tactic when you make jokes about things like being canceled because you just don't really want to deal with it. In fact, I wrote this part down because this was at the very end. Shane, at the beginning, like right out of the gate, makes a joke about being canceled. Steve asks him something about, like, you were canceled, and he goes, I don't know how many times, like 4 or 5. Like, he makes a joke, like, immediately out of the gate about it. And then about 4 or 5 times throughout the interview, continues to make jokes kind of about being canceled. And then Scott says to him at the end, you don't want to make a joke about cancellation because it's the deflection. Shane says at one point he does want to talk about it to help someone. And so what's interesting about this is that, like, when Scott says something and kind of confronts him and says, you don't want to make a joke about this, like, that's deflection, like, that's, which I have been saying in drama videos for 2 years now, okay, that this is Shane's deflection tactic because he cannot handle just owning and taking accountability. And people are like, well, how much accountability do you want Shane Dawson to do? Blah, 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 whatever, okay? Well, I want him to own his cancellation if he feels like he's been canceled so much. You know, like, they talked a lot about cancel culture in here, and it was interesting because I saw people in the comment sections that were in favor of Shane, that were saying, Shane, nobody canceled you, you canceled yourself by stop posting videos, which I think is interesting, right? Because I'm a believer, y'all are going to watch who you want to watch, okay? I could come on here and say the most scathing things about somebody, but if you still want to watch them, you're going to watch them. So I'm not really that much of a believer today in cancel culture. Like, I think people cancel themselves by their own actions. I think we want to blame the people talking about it instead of the people actually doing the actions, and instead of taking responsibility for it. You know, when all of this went down, I said Shane should just get on video and talk to his audience, okay? Shane comes out in this interview and he said that at some point he wants to get on a video and he wants to talk about what happened to help somebody else out there that might be going through something similar, because he talks about that, you know, it's not just cancellation within YouTube, there's cancellation in all other areas of work and in the world and things like that. Okay, well, I'm not big on people in the moment being a teacher, but enough time has gone by that I think for Shane Dawson to sit down and talk to his audience about what has gone on with him, how it affected him emotionally and mentally, and then to say, and I'm doing this because even if I just help one person out there, I think that would be well received. I think there are enough people that are just kind of done with Shane Dawson, but I think there are enough people out there that still love him that I think that they would hear that and they would receive it. I think it's a little bit too little too late at this point, but I think the fact that so many people are commenting on this video about how happy they are to see Shane and this reception, I think, you know, tells enough that people want to see this part of Shane. They want to see him talk about this. They want to see him move past this and move on. You know, he talks in there about that at some point he just was never going to come back to YouTube, and then he was never going to make videos again because he basically, like, he just couldn't do anything right, and so he just kind of lost all creativity in his head. And then he talked about, I got a lot of messages from people saying that Shane's making a movie. I don't know, like, Shane said in there that he has 2 scripts for horror movies and he was trying to get backing for one, and then he was, I don't know, like, I didn't hear a definitive that he was making a movie. I don't know where, maybe I missed that part, but I mean, I watched it pretty closely. So I don't know where people got that, I think, it's interesting. I was thinking back when Shane was talking about, like, he just kind of had no idea what to come back and do on videos. And I was thinking about, like, all of, like, the Instagram stories and things that Shane put up where he was like, I want to film something, but I don't know what to film. What would you guys like to see from me, right? And then he puts out just recently this conspiracy video that he did, with like the food and all that kind of stuff. And I thought it's interesting because I think that to some degree, Shane Dawson is trying to get back in the good graces of his audience, which that's fine. I understand that. Like, I get that, right? I mean, you want the people to watch your videos to like you. I mean, you want them to like the content that you're putting out. But, it's also interesting to me that Shane hasn't figured out that I think it's important for him to do what he loves. And he even kind of, like, fell over some of his words. Like, he called his series that he did with, like, Jake Paul and Jeffree Star, he called them documentaries, and then he, like, kind of retracted that statement and said, well, videos that I put out or whatever. And it was like, well, he thinks they're documentaries. Like, he's even fed into that, right? And it's just like, if you want to do documentaries and call them documentaries, do what makes you happy, Shane. Like, at this point... And this is the thing that if you truly believe that you've been canceled and you truly believe that, you can't really redeem yourself and there are people out, then why does it matter what you do? Then do exactly what you want to do, make yourself happy, and the people that love you will follow it, and the people that don't, who cares? They're not going to watch it anyway, Shane, to me, in this interview, still seems very, very lost to me. Very lost. And, at the one point... And maybe this is because I'm in recovery and Steve's in recovery. And so when I was watching this, I was like, okay, I get it. But like Steve's like, I feel very compassionate towards you. Like I feel kind of empathetic. And it's hard for me because it's covering all this kind of stuff. And I just talked about this in a vlog the other day, Like, covering drama through the years and being a person in recovery, like, that's hard to kind of reconcile sometimes, right? Which is why I always just try to share my experience, strength, and hope and just give it, opinions based on, this is what I would do if I was in this situation to try to help somebody, right? Like, I don't try to, like, be like, rah, 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 whatever. But what's interesting is, he said, like, I have compassion for you for what you've gone through. Like, I have empathy for you. And in watching Shane, like, I have compassion and I have empathy, but when you really break it down and you watch it, if you are not a Shane Dawson super fan and you're really watching this interview, what is very apparent is Shane Dawson still to this day, 3 years later, does not really understand or get why he was canceled. He doesn't understand it. Like, and he refuses to accept it, okay? Which means that he really hasn't learned anything from it. Except for the fact that he continues to kind of say through the video that he's really happy that it happened. He's happy that he got canceled because he got to learn a lot from it. But he never says what he learned from it. He never says, like, what it, except for that, he was posting 5 videos a day and now he's more focused on his personal life, and they moved to Colorado because he's really close with Ryland's family and stuff like that. So basically, what I got from it was he's happy he got canceled because he was so driven to make videos, and now that since he's been canceled, he's focused more on his personal life, which... Okay, fine. Like, I mean, we heard that from Manny and UA, too, when he said, my career might be in the red, but my, personal life's in the green as far as Social Blade. Like, I understand that, right? But, like, that's all you learned. Like, you didn't learn anything else from all of the offensive jokes that you put out there, all of the blackface, all of that. You didn't learn anything from that? Nothing? You didn't learn anything from that? That maybe that was inappropriate, whether that was 20 years ago or whether that was today. The comments that you made, the statements that you made that were inappropriate, like, you don't understand that there's, okay, like, that to me, like, if he could have gotten in this interview and said, I totally own what I did, and, like, I know that it was inappropriate, but, like, he really struggles to this day in accepting that and saying that, and you can see it, right? And that, for me... Just on the outside looking in, okay, and this is where people are like, oh, you hate Shane Dawson, he can't do anything. Listen, I have no emotional attachment to this man, okay? I wish him all the best. And in fact, I wish that Shane Dawson could be the happiest person in the entire world and turn his career around and just accept things as they are, right? But to do that, sometimes you have to accept things as they are. And you have to say, okay, this is who I was. Why was I that way? And he's, even like he's talking about, like, he always loved attention and shock value and things like that. But then he starts talking about how he tried to weave in these lessons into these, and I'm like, oh, God, you still don't get it. Like, you still don't understand how it was offensive to people, right? And so... And he says things in there. He talks a lot about the surrogate and the egg donor and how, like, they're having a child and whatever. And he talks about that he probably would never have put any of that stuff out had he known he was going to have kids because the internet is forever, which I did think that that part was interesting. It's like a little bit into the movement that Shane Dawson understands, like, what he's done, right? I'm going to refer to my notes a little bit because I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. He said he wasn't mad that the cancellation happened, but was at first. And he said, you know, at first I was mad that the cancellation happened, but he goes, I'm not now. But, like, every time that he mentioned it, he kind of struggled with it. I don't know, like, he still seems rather upset to me that he was canceled. And he even said, you know, like, I made jokes about it at first, but I don't really anymore, and that's why I don't talk about it. I think Shane Dawson watches so closely, like, everything that happens. Like, if you remember back in the day, he used to watch Social Blade and the people's numbers going up and down. You know, I can remember when talking to the people back in the day that they would say, oh, Shane knows exactly what people's numbers are. They're going, I mean, he's watched that stuff so closely through the years. He even references watching a drama video on here of their reaction to something. I can't remember what. And I'm like, he still watches the drama videos. He still watches all this kind of stuff. He said there was like a year and a half where he wasn't like on his phone or anything. Before that, he had been on there like looking to see if he was trending on Twitter because there wasn't a day that went by that he wasn't trending on Twitter. But when he says this, it's interesting because the timing of when that would have happened and when he's referring to it doesn't kind of really match up. Like, he basically says that this was like years ago. And he's like, I was trending every day for something. But then he references something and I'm like, okay, but that was after you were canceled when you said you weren't on your phone every day. So, like, and maybe I misunderstood what he was saying, but but he said he's not mad about being canceled anymore. He says that he was thankful for the cancellation because he was able to figure stuff out. He said, in my personal life, I'm not a crazy, gross person. I don't make gross jokes, right? Which is so interesting to me because on the podcast, not just the interview podcast, but his podcast, and in videos that he does with Ryland, he really, really struggles with editing himself, you know, to this day. And I'm like, okay, if you don't make crazy, gross jokes in your personal life, then why are they flowing over into your professional life? Like, that shouldn't happen whatsoever, right? Like, if that's who you are. Steve-O says he has compassion for Shane and shared story about regret, and that regret is the way forward, okay? But Shane said he doesn't regret what happened or what he did earlier. He says, like, I don't really regret what happened or what I did. And Steve-O does this amazing story about regret and the difference between regret and shame and how regret is like the way to move forward through something and that you have to learn from it, right? And it's just this beautiful story. And Shane's like, oh, okay. And like, you can tell he kind of doesn't really get it. And then that's when Scott says something about you don't want to make a joke about the cancellation. They never ask him questions about what got him canceled or what he did. And then I said he did seem more genuine in this than anything else, which I do agree with. He does. And then at the very end, this is when I went and I looked at the comments, and I said most of the comments were extremely supportive of Shane and happy that he was so honest. Several people said that this is what he needs to do to get back, and is being honest. Some people questioned Steve-O for supporting him by having him on, but not many. I will say, not many. There were a few comments where people were like, I don't understand why you had Shane on your podcast. Like, why are you supporting this person, blah, blah, blah. But the majority of the comments, and I don't believe that Steve-O was deleting comments, the majority of the comments were just glowing in favor of Shane. A lot of those, I would say, were saying, this is the Shane that we want to see. This is the authentic, genuine Shane that we want to see that's really honest with the audience. And I think that that's what I've been saying all along. You know, I think it's a real missed opportunity that Shane never sat down. You know, and I even speculated that I thought that his first video back would be him going back and showing his career from 13, 15 years ago all the way to today and showing clips of his own videos and explaining where his mindset was at that time and what humor was at that time and how he had changed over this period of time and what the cancellation did to him and how he learned and grew from the cancellation and how it affected him in Ryland. Like, I think that would be a phenomenal video for him to do. You know, like, turn the camera on yourself, Shane, instead of wanting to turn it on everybody else like Jeffree Star. And maybe you would learn from that process. Maybe you would grow from that process of learning well, this is what I went through. This is what my whole career has been about. And then maybe it would also inspire you to move forward when you could learn from the mistakes of your past. I think that's what we all do as human beings, you know? We grow and we learn from the mistakes of our past. But in regards to, you know, I think a lot of people want to just come for Shane. They wanted me to make this video and just drag him. I thought it was a good interview. I really do. I didn't think Shane said a whole lot in the interview, but I did think it was a good learning experience for him. And like I said, you know, he seemed very genuine and very down to earth, but very nervous. And I can understand that because he didn't have any control over the direction of where the interview was going to go. But I thought it was a fantastic interview. I would recommend it for anybody to watch, especially for the recovery pieces. I thought it was very interesting how they played those into all of that. So anyway, let me know what you think about all of that in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.